everybody, welcome to Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. Got a good show for you guys today. You didn't know, I'm Jeff Waldorf, host of the show, and welcome. Kind of weird. Always having to introduce myself, but hello, everybody out there. Wow, what a weird intro. Super weird. Anyway, very, very awkward. And that's the kind of guy I am. A little awkward, but full of great information. And that's what we have today. We've got a lot of good stories here. We got some breaking stuff. Look, if you don't like hearing about Russia, you might not want to stay tuned to the first couple of segments because there is some major stuff on that. Major news. So, and that's what we talk about here. We talk about news. And so we've got those stories. I do want to briefly address what happened in London today. But then, we also have a little bit on Trump care story from last week that I wanted to get to. And then we've got, again, like I said, we got some Russian stories. And then we got Tulsi Gabbard, fantastic, doing something very, very awesome and very progressive. New piece of legislation. I love it. And then we've got voter fraud. We have another confirmed case of voter fraud, this time in Colorado. I've got the details on that, so we'll break it down. So altogether, pretty good show. I think we'll start out with, of course, in London. We'll have a little fun, and then we'll get into Paul Manafort. So that is a very, very important story. So that's going to take up a very long chunk of our time here. So, but anyway, before I get into the stories, I do want to thank the patrons. We've got a bunch of new patrons over the last couple of days. Thank you so much for signing up and helping independent progressive media. We got two of them, Perry Ramstead, Jane Lucy. Thank you, Jane Perry. You all are awesome for supporting independent media. So if you want to sign up, help the show out, patreon.com/TYTNation. Of course, I also want to let you know that if you at all, or if you miss any shows, any live shows, and you prefer the live kind of format as opposed to the video clips, which go out 5 days a week, well, then you can always catch us on FYI Nation as well at 9 o'clock Eastern every night. So for a nice free replay of the show. So if you like the podcast, that's a great option for you. If you like the whole internet radio type of thing, go there. So check it out there. All right. Anyway, that out of the way, I want to briefly address what happened in London today. There was a little bit of an attack. So there was a terrorist attack in London today. A lot of people were hurt and killed. 4 people were killed after an attacker had ran through. Basically, it was a terrorist attack involving a car. He ran over a bunch of people, or he or they or whoever it was. There's not a lot of details on that yet. And there was also a police officer that was stabbed. So, look, again, this is something that's been happening in Europe. You do have people that will use a car as a weapon and will hurt a lot of people. 20 people are, of course, injured as of right now, wounded in this terror attack, which happened at Westminster Bridge. Now, this is around Parliament. So, like, this person was who had drove the car, again, ran over at least 20 people, stabbed a police officer, and then was shot and killed by the police. Afterwards, of course, they locked down Parliament, and they're trying to figure out who this person was. The attacker has not been identified, and the police have said that a full counterterrorism investigation is underway. Again, we don't know who this person is that attacked Parliament. We don't know the motivations. Was it obviously it was a terrorist attack, but from whom? And usually a terrorist attack has some sort of ideology behind it. So it's going to be very interesting as soon as the details come out, who exactly is to blame for this, what were the motivations, and of course the impacts of this And already Twitter is exploding with anti-Muslim sentiment, of course. We don't even know if it's a Muslim, but immediately somebody goes, Muslims, the Muslims, it's always the Muslims. Well, it might be. It's not like Islamic terrorism is something that doesn't happen. No, it does happen. It happened in Nice, for example, in Paris. So, but immediately jumping to it, I don't know. I'm not so comfortable with that. Like, let's wait. Let's get the facts and see who exactly is to blame for this. But anyway, that's what we know now. Again, more facts are going to continue to come out over the next couple of days, and I'll probably have a more comprehensive report for you tomorrow, or then the following days. All right. Anyway, so and look, everybody's coming together. I'm seeing the hashtag Pray for London, and that's wonderful. And I don't personally pray. I'm not a religious person. But at the same time, I understand the sentiment, and I agree with it. The only problem with that is that there are people being killed in Central South Africa, okay, in places where by groups like Boko Haram. Well, now those victims are generally black. So, but we don't pay attention to them. You don't see, like, pray for the Congo. Or you don't see for, pray for Nigeria. It's mostly when Western countries get attacked, and there's a little bit of hypocrisy here. When Western countries do get attacked, everybody's outraged. But when there are terrorist attacks in other places by these same sorts of Islamic radicals, well, Islamic terrorists, we don't seem to pay attention. So I did have to address some of that hypocrisy that we have when it comes to who gets attacked and who does the world go to defend, and whose lives are more important. I think all of those lives are important. I feel horrific for the 4 people that were killed in this attack, the people that were killed in Paris, the people that were killed in Germany, et cetera, from some of these recent terrorist attacks. But I also feel bad for the people in Nigeria. I also feel bad for the people in Kenya and other places that we don't talk about, that we don't cover. So, again, I just want to address that. But anyway, so let's go into a fun story here from last week, and then we'll head into the Manafort stuff. All right. Now, last week, the White House has been sending out an official newsletter. It's the Trump newsletter, right? Now, it's called the Your 1600 Daily. And I guess it's used to promote things like video clips of the president and news articles, friendly news articles, of course, endorsements and other things that are good for the president. Okay, look, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. We know where they're coming from. Of course, you want to, as the president, promote the positive stories about yourself. Makes sense, right? I mean, for example, there's friendly headlines from Fox News, places like Breitbart, other conservative outlets, maybe a good article from the New York Times once in a while, when they actually write one, and all that stuff. So now, on last Friday, there was one article in particular that kind of stood out, and this was from the Washington Post. Now, this was titled, and I love this: "Trump's budget makes perfect sense and will fix America, and I will tell you why." Now, already, if you're looking at that headline and you're a Trump supporter, you're like, yeah, it will fix America. That sounds fantastic. I love it. Well, hey, again, if you're a Trump supporter, good headline, right? In fact, to get a sense of what the article actually contains, the subtitle reads, quote, "It's the best budget ever." Now, let me read you some of this article, just to give you a sample of what it's about. Now, quote, "Some people are complaining that the budget preferred by the Trump administration, despite its wonderful macho-sounding name, is too vague and makes all sorts of cuts to needed programs in favor of increasing military spending by leaps and bounds. These people are wimps." Already, I'm loving this. Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney has called it, quote, "a hard power budget." Now, this is not satire. This is something that Mick Mulvaney actually had said. It's a hard power budget. Hard power. Hard. Let's go hard. We're going hard. Power budget. Gah! Okay. Anyway, now the article continues, which is, I think, the name of an exercise program where you eat only what you can catch, pump up your guns, and then punch the impoverished in the face. This, conveniently, is also what the budget does. So, like, if you can't tell already, this seems to be satire. But no, let's continue. Right now, all the State Department's many qualified employees do is sit around being sad that they are never consulted about anything. Hashtag sad. This is frankly depressing, and it is best to put them out of their misery. Besides, they're only trained in soft diplomacy, like a woman would do, and nobody wants that. Only hard power, now that we have a man in charge who thought the name Rex Tillerson was not manly enough and rechristened himself Wayne Tracker. That was another actual story. With the money we will save on these sad public servants, we'll be able to buy lots of guns and F-35s that go boom and pow and pew pew pew. I love it. Again, if you haven't figured out this was satire, then, well, we've got the conclusion of this article. Quote, America will be stronger than it ever has been. Anyone who survives will be a gun covered in the fur of a rare mammal, capable of fighting disease with a single muscular flex. Raw power, hard raw power, gur hiss pow. It will be great. This is what the White House shared. They looked at this article, only the headline, obviously, and said, "This sounds great. Share it." It's what happens when you read only the headline and never not the actual article. Well, look, okay, so I'm making an assumption here that they did not read this, but maybe they did. Maybe they thought, this is hilarious. This is an obvious satire piece. Let's share it, man. This is great. I don't know. Maybe they did. But look, something tells me that this was not intentional. This was, hey, it sounds really good, so let's share it without actually reading it. Hilarious. And look, it should be noted that none of the other days in these same news reports that the news section featured anything like this parody. Now, this was, I want to tell you who wrote this, by the way. And this is somebody who writes continuous satire. And it's called, and it's from Alexandra Petri. So she writes for the Washington Post. She writes satire. Her article blew up, went viral on this. And so, because the White House doesn't know how to read past the headline, even past the subtitle. Oops. Sad. We're having fun. All right. So now let's go from fun to disaster. So there's a new report. Let me do that again. So there's a new report out from the Associated Press. Now it turns out that Paul Manafort has some interesting connections with certain Russian billionaires. Oh, fascinating. So this is a Russia story, okay? So, look, we already found out that he had some ties and did some work for the Ukrainians. Now, we actually have some, information in this story to go along with that as well. Now, according to this new report, Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman, secretly worked for a Russian billionaire nearly a decade ago, in 2005. Now, before you think, okay, and why does this matter? Why is this relevant? Well, let me break it down. Now, he reportedly worked to advance the interests of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Oh, so this is the AP saying this, right? And according to some of these documents that they had obtained, had an ambitious political strategy to undermine anti-Russian opposition in places like Ukraine and inside of Russia. Well, very interesting. So the AP is saying that Manafort worked for this billionaire, had ties to Putin to do things that were beneficial to Putin. Interesting. Now, look, there's an overall theme of this, right? Where this could be considered criminal, and I'll get to that as well. Now, part of that is basically the fact that this contradicts assertions by the Trump administration and Paul Manafort himself that he had never worked for anyone tied to Russian interests. Well, that would be probably the third person, somewhere around the third person, maybe more, who has lied about having any sort of contact with the Russians. First you had Michael Flynn, then you had Jeff Sessions, and now Paul Manafort saying, Russians? No, I didn't work for the Russians. I didn't work with anyone associated with the Russians. Really? Interesting. So what did Manafort do? Well, according to this report, Manafort proposed in a confidential strategy plan as early as June 2005, according to the documents obtained by the Associated Press, that he would influence politics, business dealings, and news coverage inside the United States, Europe, and the former Soviet republics to benefit this billionaire and ultimately the Putin administration. Interesting. Now, Manafort pitched the plans to Russian aluminum magnate Oleg Deripaska. So this guy is that shady, that billionaire. He's a aluminum magnate. I almost said magnet. So just be proud of me that I didn't do that. But it was close. Now, Deripaska is a close Putin ally with whom Manafort had eventually signed a $10 million annual contract beginning in 2006. Now, again, these documents show wire transfers between Deripaska and Paul Manafort. So we have evidence here that he was working for Deripaska. Okay, again, that's not really the illegal part. Okay, he can work for whoever he wants, that's fine. Now, according to interviews with several people familiar with payments to Manafort and business records obtained by the Associated Press, Manafort and Deripaska maintained a business relationship until at least 2009, according to one person familiar with the work. Now, in this strategy plan, Manafort writes, quote, "We are now of the belief that this model that they came up with can greatly benefit the Putin government if employed at the correct levels with appropriate commitment to success. The effort," Manafort wrote, "will be offering a great service that can refocus both internally and externally the policies of the Putin government." So let's kind of break that apart. So in this memo, he says, yes, I'm working for a Russian billionaire. This Russian billionaire is an ally of Putin that wants to help refocus the policies of the Putin government and essentially lobby on behalf of the Putin government with other nations. Okay. So now, of course, it's not just the United States. It's former Soviet states like Kazakhstan and Ukraine, who Manafort also worked for. Now, remember, when this was happening, this was during the Bush administration. Now, during that time, our relationship with the Russian government wasn't great, and it's not great now. Okay. Now, that is, of course, despite George W. Bush famously saying, "Oh, I looked into his eyes, I looked into his soul, and Putin is a wonderful man." Yeah, okay. Yeah, I kind of sounded a bit more like Lindsey Graham than George W. Bush, but you get the point. Now, Manafort's plans were laid out in these documents that were obtained, again, by the Associated Press, that included strategy memoranda and records showing international wire transfers for millions of dollars. Now, how much work Manafort had performed under the contract was unclear. Now, of course, Manafort has dismissed the investigations as a political witch hunt and misguided, saying, "Hey, man, I never worked for Russian interests. I worked for this billionaire, and we did business." Okay. But, see, if he had done so, which he did, according to these documents, well, it would have been nice to know. See, what they did, what he was doing as a lobbyist, remember, he was a lobbyist for this Russian interest. That essentially means you are going and bribing politicians. Or, well, not bribing politicians. That's heavy, okay? That's We don't have to prove that. Basically, you were lobbying these politicians. You were saying, hey, you know what? You know what's great? This Russian guy that sells aluminum, maybe you would like to do some contracts. He's a friend of mine, and, he's got some good contracts. You should probably sign up with him, maybe do some importation, make him some money. Okay. Now, that's essentially doing propaganda. Now, he got paid $10 million a year to do that. So, what's the big deal here? Well, the big deal is that he lied about it. In a statement to the AP, Manafort confirmed that he worked for Deripaska in various countries, but said the work was being fairly uncast as inappropriate or nefarious as part of a smear campaign. Now, look, lobbying, not really nefarious. We don't like it. I certainly don't like lobbying. But okay, look, it seemed that there would be nothing illegal about the act of lobbying itself, right? Now, the thing about it is that, well, he didn't register as a lobbyist. That's a bit of a problem. I'll get to that. Now, he said, quote, I worked with Oleg Deripaska almost a decade ago, representing him on business and personal matters in countries where he had investments. My work for Mr. Deripaska did not involve representing Russia's political interests. So let's go back to what Manafort wrote in these memos. Quote, we are now of the belief that this model can greatly benefit the Putin government if employed at the correct levels with the appropriate commitment to success. Hey, you wrote that. I didn't write that. The AP didn't write that. You wrote that. Okay. Are you saying that you either didn't mean that or you were lying to Deripaska? I'm sure that he would like to know, as he is currently kind of angry at you. But I'll get to that. Now, who is this guy? Who is this Russian aluminum magnate? Deripaska became one of Russia's wealthiest men under Putin, buying assets abroad in ways widely perceived to benefit the Kremlin's interests. U.S. diplomatic cables from 2006 described Deripaska as among the 2 to 3 oligarchs Putin turns to on a regular basis, and more or less a permanent fixture on Putin's trips abroad. So they're very close. They're very buddy-buddy. All right, fascinating. Now, in response to questions about Manafort's consulting firm, a spokesman for Deripaska in 2008, at least 3 years after they began working together, said Deripaska had never hired his lobbying firm. Very interesting, because that part's actually true. He did not hire the lobbying firm, but he hired Manafort himself. Very, very important distinction here. Now, another Deripaska spokesman in Moscow last week declined to answer the Associated Press's questions. So again, that's kind of weird. We have documents that confirm that Manafort had worked for Deripaska. There was money exchanged. However, I guess he's right when he says, well, his lobbying firm never worked for me. Well, okay, we're not asking about the lobbying firm. Did Manafort ever work for you? Now, if you can remember, this isn't the first time Manafort has been linked to a pro-Putin lobbying operation. The AP found that Manafort had orchestrated a covert Washington lobbying operation until 2014 on behalf of Ukraine's ruling pro-Russian political party. These newly obtained business records link Manafort more directly to Putin's interest in the region. According to those records, and people with direct knowledge of Manafort's work for Deripaska, Manafort made plans to open an office in Moscow. And at least some of Manafort's work in Ukraine was directed by Deripaska, not local political interests. Now, it's important to note as well that Moscow office never actually opened. All right, so there's that. Now, not only that, but back in 2005, Manafort told Deripaska that he was pushing policies as part of his work in Ukraine. Quote, at the highest levels of the U.S. government, the White House, Capitol Hill, and the State Department, according to the documents. He also said that he had hired a leading international law firm with close ties to President Bush to support our client's interests. But he did not identify the firm. Manafort also said that he was employing an unidentified legal experts for the effort at leading universities and think tanks, including Duke, New York University, and the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Manafort, however, did not disclose details about the lobbying work to the Justice Department during the period the contract was in place. So he lobbied for you in Ukraine. Again, nothing illegal unless you don't report it. And that is the issue here. He was not open about his relationship with this billionaire who happened to be part of Russia's inner circle. And this is under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. People who lobby in the U.S. on behalf of foreign political leaders or political parties must provide detailed reports about their actions to the State Department. Willfully failing to register is a felony and can result to up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. So, if that is true, that he ended up lobbying on behalf of this Russian oligarch to advance Russia's political interests, that is a bit of a problem. Especially since he's like, oh no, I didn't lie. No, I didn't work for Russia. I didn't work for Putin, except when he said that my plan here will help Putin. Oops. Uh-oh. Now, again, how much Deripaska had paid Manafort in total, not clear. We don't know the numbers on that. But people familiar with the relationship said money transfers to Manafort amounted to tens of millions of dollars and had continued through at least 2009. Now, so what was the ultimate aim of this? Was it to overthrow the government or to hack the elections in favor of a Russian candidate? No. What you got to understand is that, like everything, this comes down to the money. You got to follow the money, right? In strategy memos, Manafort proposed that Deripaska and Putin would benefit from lobbying these Western governments, especially in the United States, to allow oligarchs to keep possession of formerly state-owned assets in places like Ukraine. He proposed building long-term relationships with Western journalists and a variety of measures to improve recruitment, communications, and financial planning by pro-Russian parties in the region. Manafort also proposed extending his existing work in Eastern Europe to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Georgia, where he pledged to bolster the legitimacy of governments friendly to Putin and undercut anti-Russian figures through political campaigns, nonprofit front groups, and media or operations. Now, for his $10 million contract, Manafort did not use his consulting firm, Davis Manafort. Instead, he used a different company, LOAV Ltd., that he had registered in Delaware in 1992. So here's some interesting facts about LOAV Ltd. He listed that company as having the same address as his lobbying consulting firm in Alexandria, Virginia. Now, in other records, however, LOAV's address was listed at Paul Manafort's home, also in Alexandria. Now, Manafort sold this home back in July 2015 for $1.4 million and now owns an apartment in Trump Tower. Now, Manafort's work, according to these documents, continued with Deripaska for years, though they had recently had a falling out in 2014 in a Cayman Islands bankruptcy court. Now, the billionaire gave Manafort nearly $19 million to invest in a Ukrainian TV company called Black Sea Cable. According to legal filings by Deripaska's representatives, it is said that after taking the money, Manafort and his associates stopped responding to Deripaska's queries about how the funds were being used. Interesting. Now, early it gets really fascinating here. Early in the 2016 campaign, Deripaska's representatives openly accused Manafort of fraud and pledged to recover the money from him. However, after Donald Trump earned the Republican nomination, he became the nominee, Deripaska's representatives said they were no longer interested in discussing this case. That is curious. Doesn't that get you to ask some questions? Like perhaps maybe somebody intervened on Manafort's behalf with this Russian billionaire. Look, none of this is definitive proof that Trump had anything to do with this. Let's be fair. However, it does seem to go along with what we found with people who are around Donald Trump in his orbit having Russian ties. Very interesting. And it does kind of make you think, doesn't it? Now, for me personally, I don't think this is a coincidence. Now, what this does not mean, and let me be very clear, is that we should not be fear-mongering and gearing up for any sort of conflict with Russia. I'm not interested in war. Nobody's interested in war, except for the defense contractors and some in the corporate media. Not at all interested in going to war with Russia. So again, let's stop the fear-mongering. Let's stop calling this, saying that the Russians, they hacked our elections is an act of war. Ridiculous. That kind of rhetoric does not help whatsoever. This also doesn't mean that every accusation against Putin is 100% correct. Doesn't mean they hacked the election, etc. Right? None of that. What it does mean is that it seems like there are financial interests between many former and current prominent Trump staffers, people in the Trump inner circle, and Vladimir Putin and other Russian oligarchs. Again, this is an issue about following the money. You got to look at the money. Money talks, bullshit walks, right? Now, what came out of those financial interests remains to be seen. But we do know that this current administration does stand to benefit Putin economically. For example, more fossil fuels. Well, it just so happens that Russia is a petrol state. They have lots of natural gas exports. They have lots of oil. Their economy is partly based on these exports. Well, we know the Obama administration, and by extension the Clinton administration, would not have been friendly with these climate policies, for example, to reduce emissions, as well as sanctions on Russia for what happened over in Ukraine. Well, put in by the Obama administration, likely continued by the Clinton administration, would have hurt Russia's economy. Well, Rex Tillerson, who is now Secretary of State, he's like, oh, well, I worked for ExxonMobil. I negotiated a $500 million deal with Russia to export oil. We kind of would like that deal. It would be kind of good for us economically. It would also be economically good for Putin. So that's what we know. That's why it kind of matters. That's why we need to continue to investigate these things. Now, again, is there a deal between Putin and Trump? I don't know. We don't have any information on that. But my personal feeling, and you could say, oh, come on, Jeff, you're fear-mongering. You're totally wrong. Russia, Russia, Russia. I might be wrong. I might be wrong. But just I have a personal feeling that there is some sort of economic deal between both, again, Putin and Donald Trump. That's why we investigate. This is why we investigate. This is why we look into these things. This is why we talk about these things. And again, it's not just deals with Putin and Trump, possible deals. Donald Trump loves anybody who gives him money, who makes any sort of deal with him, whether it be Russia, whether it be Saudi Arabia, which again, Donald Trump has investments in these countries. Why do you think they're not on the travel ban? It all comes down to money. It all comes down to doing business deals. You got to follow the money. And when you do, you end up in some very interesting places. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Speaking of money, Donald Trump is actually 100% correct when he said that Trump Tower was wiretapped. Very, very interesting. Interesting story. Now, before you say, look, I knew Obama was going after Trump. I knew it. He was wiretapped. Well, now wait a minute here. Hold. Yes, there was a wiretap. But guess who they were after? It actually wasn't Donald Trump. It actually wasn't his family. Here's the interesting facts about this. Now, back in 2013, the FBI had been doing an investigation into an international criminal organization, a mob. Now, that organization just happened to do some business out of Trump Tower. Interesting. Now, ABC News reports that the FBI had obtained a warrant to eavesdrop on a, quote, sophisticated organized money laundering network that operated out of Trump Tower, Unit 63A in Trump Tower, starting in 2011 and ending in 2013. So again, the FBI, they went to a FISA court. They said, hey, we have reason to believe that this criminal enterprise has set up in this building, which happened to be Trump Tower. So we would like to wiretap them to see what they're doing. It was approved, and they were able to do so. Now, who was running this sophisticated money laundering scheme? You're going to love this. Russia. No, not Russia. I'm kidding. But it was the Russian mafia. The Russian mob. I'm not making this up. This is not fake news. And again, I'm just saying, I've got fake news. Fake news. No, this is actually something. This is a case that happened. And this was a case that ended up with prosecutions. Now, ABC News notes that the FBI's investigation into these mobsters led to, quote, a federal grand jury indictment of more than 30 different people. Fake news. No, not fake news. Now, one of the prosecutions included one of the world's most notorious Russian mafia bosses, Alimzam. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this name. Kunov. Oh, disaster. Now, the FBI does note, too, that even though they did operate out of Trump Tower, Trump himself was not at all implicated in the FBI's indictment. It's likely the guy had no idea. He's not the smartest person. You hand him a stack of money to rent out an apartment, he's going to be like, take it, have at it, man. Great. I get money, you get an apartment. Tremendous. Again, not a smart person. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, although Tikhonov evaded arrest in the early part of 2013, he got away. He did manage to publicly resurface later that year. Now, where did he resurface? Well, it turns out he was back in Moscow. Well, that would make sense, leaving the United States, going back to Moscow, where he doesn't have criminal charges on him. And look, it just happened to be at the Miss Universe pageant, where he was spotted near Donald Trump in the VIP section. Look, I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to leave that to you guys. Whatever that means. Maybe they were just both VIPs and ended up in the same place. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate that they were sitting there talking to each other or had anything to do with each other. Or maybe Donald Trump's like, oh, hey, it's my old friend. Alimzam. Hey, how you doing, buddy? You here to watch the Miss Universe pageant? Great. Tremendous. Again, Trump's not a sophisticated person, okay? If somebody gives him money, rents out an apartment, he's not going to care. He rented out apartments to Saudi Arabians. And he's like, oh, I love Saudi Arabians. I love these guys. These are the good Muslims. They rent out my apartment. They give me money. How can I not like them? All right, fair enough. Hey, nothing wrong with that, I guess. Look, he doesn't care who you are as long as you're nice to him. Again, not a sophisticated person. But again, this is the whole thing with Donald Trump. I don't think he even realizes that what he's doing is getting him in trouble. Sad. Baby. Anyway. So, that's the Russian stuff. Let's get into something else. We got a couple more stories here. Let's talk about something good. Something progressive, for once. Now, Tulsi Gabbard recently proposed a bipartisan bill to end criminal penalties on marijuana. Now, I love this. Now, she worked with Republicans in order to bring this bill that would decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. Now, I want to show you a video of her introducing this bill, and then we'll talk about it. Take a look.
I'm rising today to urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1227, the Ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act, which I've introduced with my Republican colleague, a fellow Army veteran and former prosecutor from the state of Virginia, Congressman Tom Garrett. where we are seeking to address our outdated and widely problematic marijuana laws by federally decriminalizing marijuana. FBI reports have shown that in 2011 alone, an individual in the United States was arrested for marijuana use, sale, or possession every 42 seconds. Every 42 seconds, mostly in poor and minority communities. Our current laws are turning everyday Americans into criminals, sending them to jail, ruining their lives, tearing apart families, and wasting huge amounts of taxpayer dollars to arrest, prosecute, and incarcerate people for marijuana use, a drug that has been proven time and time again to be far less dangerous than alcohol, both for individual consumers as well as for the people around them. So rather than actually helping people, our current laws are turning them into criminals, forever impacting their future and the future of their families. Over the years, we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars locking people up for nonviolent marijuana offenses, creating strain within our criminal justice system, clogging court calendars, and resulting in further overcrowding our prisons. These reforms that we're calling for in this bipartisan bill are common sense, and they're long overdue changes that will help to reduce the strain on our criminal justice system, create certainty and reduce contradictions and confusion between state and federal law, and updating those federal laws to actually meet the needs and progress that states are making across the country.
All right, so there's Tulsi Gabbard. And look, let me tell you why I love this, and it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's the right thing to do. It makes no sense that we continue to jail people for a plant. A plant that, as she mentioned, and a lot of the science has mentioned, that is actually less harmful than drinking alcohol. Oh, and number two, she's showing, because this is bipartisan, that she can appeal, that progressive ideas can appeal to members of both parties. Now, her bill was actually proposed at the end of February. Now, and since then, other Democrats and Republicans have signed on, including Jared Polis of Colorado, Earl Blumenauer of Oregon, both Democrats, Don Young of Arkansas, Republican, of course, Justin Amash of Michigan, who's, big libertarian, and Dana Rohrabacher of California. So, look, right now, this seems to be very bipartisan. That's great. Now, of course, it's not going to pass. Look who's in Congress, look who's president. I don't even think with the Democratic Congress that you could ever get this passed at this current point. There's just too much reefer madness going on here. Still, not only that, but look, I'm convinced that Donald Trump, he doesn't care. So I don't think that, I think if one of his advisors were to come up and say, hey, you shouldn't sign this pot bill because, we're going to help you. We're from the private prison corporation. My donors say you shouldn't sign this. Trump would be like, I guess I'm not going to sign this. And you also have Jeff Sessions. Now, Sessions runs the Justice Department, and this guy hates weed. Now, if you weren't sure how much he is against marijuana, let me give you some quotes. Quote, "We need grown-ups in charge in Washington to say marijuana is not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized. It ought to not be minimized. That it's in fact a very real danger. Marijuana is a very real danger. Let me tell you what." Okay, so look, as we've shown, it's actually less dangerous than alcohol. You know how many people die from marijuana overdose per year? 0. None. Not a dick. That's how many people die. Not only that, another quote. "You can't have the President of the United States of America," and he's talking about President Obama here, "talking about marijuana like it is no different than taking a drink. It is different. It is already causing a disturbance in the states that have made it legal." Disturbance. Oh, okay. So what kind of disturbance? I mean, we should be hearing about all sorts of marijuana, induced stabbings and murders. I mean, you ever watch Reefer Madness? Literally, they would show somebody who was high on marijuana going and stabbing somebody. Crazy. So why aren't we seeing this stuff in Colorado? Why aren't we seeing this stuff in Oregon, Washington? Because it's not happening. It's not real. It's reefer madness. It's craziness. Now, there is something going on in these states, though, that have legalized it. It is called a windfall of money. Let me give you an example. In 2016, Colorado connected $200 million in tax revenue from marijuana alone. That's 1 year, $200 million. They made over $1 billion in pot sales in 2016. Insanity. Now, finally, there is this quote. Jeff Sessions says, quote, "Good people don't smoke marijuana." So if you are a bad person, then that's the kind of person you are that smokes marijuana. You're a bad person. You're a terrible person. Well, it seems to be pretty clear. This is the guy that's in charge of the Justice Department. And again, there are a lot of congressmen, senators, etc., that are anti-marijuana or that have been paid off by, for example, the alcohol lobby or the private prison lobby. In fact, recent story out a couple of weeks ago, probably a month ago, of New York Governor Cuomo. Now, the alcohol lobby, it's found out, The Intercept did a great story on this, that you had the alcohol lobby giving Cuomo millions of dollars in campaign donations, legal bribes. And then look at that. Afterwards, after he got all that money, he came out and said, oh, marijuana is so dangerous, we need to keep this a controlled substance. We cannot legalize it recreationally. We just can't do it. We can't do it. It's dangerous. This is what's going on. You got to follow the money. Always comes back to the money. Then, of course, speaking of the money, Geo Group and private, Corrections Corporation of America, or whatever they changed their name to, because you ever notice how these evil corporations always have to change their name after a while because people link it to make the name synonymous to evil? If you keep having to change your name because people start hating your company for what you're doing, because what you're doing is shit, well, then maybe you should change your business model. I'm just saying. Now, we know that the Trump administration is now fully on board with getting rid of Obama's rules, trying to roll back the use of private prisons. So now we're going to have more private prisons, and oh, look, we're going to be tougher on marijuana, and then we're going to fill those private prison beds. That's the whole point. It's not about protecting people. It's not about saving families. It's not about saving anybody's lives. No, what it's about feeding private prison corporations and alcohol corporations more and more money, preventing competition with some of these legalized recreational things that we already have, i.e. the beer companies and big alcohol, if that's what you want to call it. It's all about making sure they don't have competition, and of course filling the beds of these giant corporations that make money on imprisoning people. They want those nonviolent offenders to fill their beds. They don't want the murderers. They don't want all the hardcore criminals. No, what they want is that people in there that were smoking a plant. Why? Because they're easy to maintain. And they make lots and lots of money off this. Again, follow the money, right? However, Gabbard, she's fighting against all that, and she's stating the facts about marijuana, and I absolutely love it. Now, while this doesn't have a chance, and I pointed out why, there is something good. It forces the conversation to happen. Gone are the days where TV can tell you, hey, pot, bad. Don't ever do drugs, kids. Don't do marijuana. It's a gateway drug. Well, people can just go and pick up their phone and Google it, and there are scientific results and studies that show that marijuana is not more dangerous than alcohol. It is not more dangerous. It doesn't belong in the Schedule 1 list. Remember, Schedule 1 is basically saying that this has zero medicinal value. No value whatsoever. And it is just dangerous. And that is patently untrue about marijuana. And again, all of this data, we have all these studies out there that prove that it is not dangerous. Not as dangerous as people like Sessions try to say. So, now it's also good to see Tulsi Gabbard out there fighting for progressive priorities, man. And actually things where there should be bipartisan consensus. Again, there's nothing liberal about saying, hey, you can put this substance in your body and we're not going to put you in jail for it. That is not a liberal position. That is a sensible position. That is a pro-freedom position. The Republicans should be all over this, and thankfully some have, and we got to give them credit for that. You know, people like Amash, and the other Republicans that signed into it. You know, for example, Don Young, right? Dana Rohrabacher. They should get credit for actually being conservative on those issues and saying, yeah, we don't want to spend more government money putting people in prison, and we believe in freedom. That is not this shouldn't be a liberal position. This is a common sense position. Okay. So credit to her, credit the Republicans for signing on to this legislation and for continuing this conversation that we absolutely need to have as a nation. All right. One more. We got our voter fraud story that I want to get to. All right. Officials have found another instance of voter fraud in the 2016 election, this time in the state of Colorado. Now, very interesting here. Now, officials in the state have charged Stephen Curtis with one count of forgery of a public record and a fifth-degree felony. That is a fifth-degree felony, an elections mail-in ballot offense, which is a misdemeanor. So basically, I'll explain what he did. Curtis is accused of filling out his ex-wife's ballot and forging her signature, which would, of course, be voter fraud. See, look at that. We found it. We found voter fraud. We knew it. It is rampant. Look at this guy. He is forging signatures for his ex-wife. Well, how did they find out? Well, officials in Weld County, Colorado, according to the Washington Post, said they learned of Curtis's allegedly fraudulent ballot when his ex-wife, Kelly Curtis, called to the local elections office in October asking about how she could cast a vote by mail from Colorado from South Carolina, her new home. Now, an election worker had reportedly told her in this call, hey man, we already received your ballot. Why are you calling? We already have your ballot. What? No, I never sent one in. Kelly Curtis says, quote, I was just completely stunned. I thought there had to be some kind of mistake. That's when verification judges for the Weld County Clerk and Recorder's Office ended up getting involved. Because obviously it seems like we have a clear case of voter fraud. Quote, we compared her ballot signature just to the signatures on her registration, said Weld County Clerk and Recorder Carly Copps, who quickly determined the signatures didn't match, but noted the ballot was sent from Steve Curtis's home in Firestone, Colorado. Interesting. So, they investigated it, and they go and, they found it. They found it came from his home. Very interesting. Now, why is this even important? Why do I bring up this one guy, this one voter fraud guy? Well, Stephen Curtis, he's not just a regular run-of-the-mill voter. He's actually very active in Colorado politics. And he hosts a political talk show called Wake Up with Steve Curtis. Oh, interesting. Now, according to the website, his show is an aggressive political, social, and spiritual dialogue that aims to, quote, unmask those right under our noses or across the country who are trying to undermine or destroy our game plans and, most importantly, our constitutional powers. How dare you undermine our game plans and our constitutional powers? Well, it seems like Stephen Curtis might be undermining something else. Election law. Now, you won't be surprised that Curtis is A, very conservative Republican, and B, he's a hypocrite. Because, of course, it turns out that Curtis was the chairman of the Colorado State Republican Party from 1997 to 1999. Oops. Not only that, but after he left the state party, he remained active in Colorado politics and eventually oversaw the Denver Tea Party Patriots Advisory Board in 2011. Okay, so long history with the Republican Party and with the Tea Party. Famous for, of course, bringing in voter ID laws, voter suppression. Now, this is probably the best part. Now, on October 6th, which is around the same time that he allegedly formed his wife's signature on this ballot, he had a conversation with another gentleman who wrote a book about, guess what? Voter fraud. Let's take a listen.
Voter fraud is is not an easy crime to commit. I mean, with the computer it is, but in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, and having people on the ground, it needs a certain cadre of devoted criminal Democrats.
As boy, as somebody that has voted for a few decades here, sometimes we used to see poll watchers, standing by, and there'd always be some election official there to get you checked in, and then there'd just be somebody sitting there, and that person was a poll watcher, and it could be a Republican, it could be a Democrat, but just someone to kind of keep an eye on things. And more and more, I see less and less of that on the ground kind of watching. And at this point, if we can't ID in many places in this country, if you cannot be asked to show an ID in order to vote, this shows me intent. There can be no other reason. This false flag of you're being racist if you ask somebody for some kind of an identification to make sure that they are who they say they are before you give them a vote. Suddenly that's become racist, and this seems to be a special or just an ongoing favorite trick of the Democrat Party, is to just charge racism. Conservatives back down, judges back down, everybody backs down because they don't want to be called a name, no matter how false it is. And then the Democrats just do what they want. And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that virtually every case of voter fraud I can remember in my lifetime was committed by Democrats. Am I onto something here, or do I just not have the facts?
Oops. Yes, you would be wrong. You committed voter fraud. So no, it wouldn't be Democrats. It would be you. The hypocrisy. Democrats, man, with your voter fraud. That's how they always win. They always win with the voter fraud. We need the poll watchers. We need someone to watch the polls to make sure they don't do voter fraud. No, maybe we need someone to watch you so that you don't do voter fraud. Steven? No, Jeff, look, you don't understand. This guy was probably just testing the system to make sure, to see how easy it is to be voter fraud, so we can do more legislation to protect the integrity of our votes. That's all it was. That's all it was. Really? Look, they're not making that argument. Not yet. But I've heard that argument before. A lot of the other Republicans that have been caught doing this always go back to, no, I was just testing the system. See, we need voter ID because, look, I just tried to do, I just got caught trying to do in-person voter fraud or voter fraud of some type. Well, no, you got caught. That means the system worked. And we don't need additional voter suppression, because that's what this all is about. This is all about trying to keep people who are Democrats away from the polls. People who are elderly, who are poor, who are minorities, who can't easily get these voter IDs, and they always make a big fuss. Well, why don't you just go out and get a voter ID? Well, a lot of people who are poor don't have cars, or they don't have time. They're working 2 jobs. They can't get to that polling station. Oh, but they'll mail it out to you. Will they? Are you sure? Maybe some will. Some don't. And you still might have to pay a fee to do so, which might not be something that someone on a fixed income can afford. This is voter suppression, and it ends up targeting minorities. He says that he has a big problem with Democrats calling it racist. Well, what else do you call it? It is voter suppression, and it impacts minorities. That's what it's about. Look, as far as in-person voter fraud, it is rare. Now, again, it wouldn't. The voter ID, the thing that you keep talking about, is not something that would solve what you were doing. And it doesn't actually solve in-person voter ID because it almost never happens. There are other ways to do this. Ways, ironically, that you just tried to do by forging your ex-wife's signature and trying to send her own, his own choice for president with her name on it. This guy, man, hypocrite, and even criminal. I mean, hey, look, you did voter fraud. You're a criminal. I'm just saying. The law is the law. So if you're a conservative that cares so much about the integrity of your votes, of your voting, then, look, he would say, what I did was wrong, absolutely wrong, and I deserve to get punished for it. Let's see if he does that. Okay. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for going around the nation with me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. I know there was a lot of Russia involved. I know I'm going to get a lot of mixed comments on that, and that's fine. You know, I may not be 100% right, but I still appreciate your feedback and your concerns and all that stuff. So anyway, one thing that I want to quick address too on some of that criticism is continuously going back to Hillary Clinton. Do you realize that if Hillary Clinton were president today, I'd be hammering her on her Saudi Arabian ties and all that other stuff. So don't think that just because it's Trump that I go after him. I would also go after people in power that actually do wrong. You see, our system is broken. Donald Trump is a symptom of our broken system, and Hillary Clinton is also a symptom of our broken system. Somebody that corrupt to rise to the top, the system itself has to be pretty goddamn corrupt. I'm just saying. So it doesn't matter who's in office. If you're doing bad things, if you are being corrupt, if you are making deals, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. We're coming for you. If a Democrat wins in 2020 and he or she ends up being as corrupt as Hillary Clinton, you damn well better believe we're going to come after you with full force. And that's just the truth of it, because that's what we tried to do here on this show, to hold the powerful accountable. Now, anyway, thanks again. I'm out of here. Remember, patreon.com/TYTNation if you want to continue to support independent progressive journalism. Thank you again, everybody, for watching, sharing this video, liking, etc., and commenting. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.